This episode is sponsored by Launch. Are you an insurance agent that is tired of quoting business to try and find a better premium to win new deals? Are you looking for a way to differentiate and stand out from your competition? Well, look no further than Launch. Launch is an industry-leading software platform that gives you pre-built assessments that you can walk through with your prospect. Launch automatically calculates your prospect's risk score, and this allows you to show your prospect the areas you can fix to negotiate better premium and coverage with underwriters. Offer more value to your clients, turn missed sales into closed business, and most of all, become a better advisor to your clients. Visit getlaunch.io today to get more information on how you can use Launch to win more BORs starting right now. That's getlaunch.io to learn more.
Welcome to the Getting Past the Premium podcast, where we focus on breaking down risk management problems bit by bit until we find a solution. If you would like to discuss anything you hear on GPP with us, please reach out using the links in the description. Enjoy today's episode.
All right, hey, well, welcome to the show, John. It's good to have you on. We're excited for the conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so for those listening, John Jackovin is with BrokerTech Ventures, and in particular with their Growth Accelerator program. And this is going to be an awesome conversation because he sees and works with founders of Insurtech every single day and helping them take their products to market and grow and scale and ultimately, hopefully help us as independent insurance agents and risk management professionals and take that technology and bring value to clients. And so, John, I want you to just kind of start around what is BrokerTech Ventures, BTV, you'll hear us say. What is it? What do you guys do? And kind of what do you do in that ecosystem?
Sure, absolutely. So again, thanks for having me. So as we were talking about before we started, my background is not in insurance, not even in Insurtech. My background is actually in startups, founding companies over the last 20 some years. Have had a couple mild successes. Have had probably more amazing failures over the course of time. It took
learning experiences.
Learning experience, right? That's all branding, right? So I took a company through Techstars in Boulder, Colorado, in 2014, which is that and YC are kind of the predominant accelerators in the country. And actually coming out of Techstars, one of the things that I kind of hit me was the fact that I wasn't any closer to my customer coming in as when I came out of the program, and that kind of stuck with me for a little while, and so this is kind of a nice intro into BTV, and what kind of brought me into the insurance industry is that in 2019, Dan Keogh, Ellen Willitson, and Susan Hatton with Holmes Murphy, which is a large independent insurance brokerage in Des Moines, Iowa, we're putting together kind of this process or this thought process around really leveraging technology to be better. It was this kind of this mindset of, listen, Insurtech is a thing that's happening to brokers, right? We're not actively participating, and I kind of liken it to being in a fight, right? Like if somebody's punching you in the face, you're in a fight whether you want to be in the fight or not. And so, and that's kind of the way Insurtech was with brokers, is that maybe they're getting a punch in the face a little bit too much, and so they said, hey, how do we participate, right? Because we want to make sure that the things that are being built are going to help us. Because technology is the clear kind of like that thing that's going to be the advantage. And they also took this mentality of, hey, it's not just a thing that Holmes Murphy should do, it should be an industry thing. And out of that, BTV was born. And the first thing that they identified was an accelerator. And it would have been really, really simple to just say, all right, let's take the playbook, because there's thousands of accelerators, right, that are kind of mentor and curriculum focused. And let's just do one of those. But they really took a different spin to it, and that different spin is what drew me in, which was ultimately they're looking to leverage the technology. For everybody that goes through the accelerator, yes, we invest capital in them, yes. But the real focus, the main focus is, can we leverage this technology, or is it a product that our customers are going to benefit from? Is it going to identify risks sooner? Is it going to drive down costs? Is it going to make, improve efficiencies, stickiness, et cetera? And so that, to me, if we kind of segue back to the whole Techstars days, that was kind of the thing that I said, this in reality is what startups need. Capital, yes, you need capital, but more importantly, you need distribution. You need people using your products. And so that's what BTV is. We have other areas of focus around capital and investment and media and innovation strategies. But I like to think of the accelerator kind of as the engine that makes the BTV vehicle go.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And you need, people giving you feedback on the product, as you mentioned, to make sure that it's what you're building, something that is actually going to be relevant and valuable, right?
Yes, definitely. We've seen it enough times where people build a solution looking for a problem.
Yeah.
Right? It's like how is this going to help somebody? Will it help somebody? And most of the time, that's really a bad way of doing it. So
yeah,
specifically outside the industry.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, seemed like that was how a lot of when this Insurtech, not revolution, but when this wave of Insurtech kind of started, it was very much, we're going to take out the independent agent. And there was a lot of outside forces looking at the industry saying, oh, this is ripe for disruption. And, we can take out a lot of the middlemen and whatever. And I think a lot of that is there's certainly room to do that for sure and improve those processes and improve the value of the client. But I think it was a lot of not people that didn't have knowledge of the industry, and it is a very unique industry. And now you're seeing a lot of, whether it's BTV or just people in the industry starting technology companies to solve problems that they're experiencing, Yep. And that's what's been really cool with some of I think the ones that have been more successful, more headline, is that it seems like it's a lot of industry folks that are building those.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, I for a while there, I would get something that popped up on Facebook that was like, hey, if you can run an 8-minute mile, you can get $100,000 of life insurance for $10 a month or something akin to that. Hey, fine. Do I need a broker for that? No, but you start getting into way more complicated situations where it's like taxes, right? Like I have somebody do my taxes, because I don't know all of the things that could potentially be out. And so, and more importantly on the broker side, they understand the insurance products that are out there. They understand, what are the potential risks, and they understand your business, and they can just combine those things together. And then, the technology just adds a piece of removing inefficiencies and being more proactive, as opposed to where I think a lot of people think of insurance as reactive, right? Something happens, my office floods, I contact, right? But insurance agents really, really add a lot of value. And I think that's why we haven't seen, other than the 8-minute mile, $100,000 worth of life insurance, we have not seen brokers really, really disintermediated at this point. Yeah.
Well, and you're going to see more of that too. I mean, as technology improves, it's going to be able to take over more of the less efficient processes, and even some of the risk analysis and a lot of that. But at the end of the day, if we're going to exist in this ecosystem as the independent agent or broker, we just need to see where our value is and where it fits. Use those tools for what they're designed for. Most of them are not going to disintermediate the broker, but they will if we don't react to it. We don't position ourselves around or with that technology, so that it allows us to build deeper relationships with clients, to better understand them, because we're not maybe doing the back end paperwork or whatever it be that tool can solve. And the beauty of it is anymore, every agency is unique, and everything that we want to do in an agency is unique. I mean, there are some obviously general things that we all do, but the way in which we do them is unique. And there are a lot of tools out there now where you can insert something into your process or how you go about business that can really either make you more efficient or bring a lot more value to your client or whatever you're trying to solve, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head. Is that the things that technology is really going to help with, and what we're seeing today are things that don't tend to add value to the relationship, right? There are these manual data entries, these silos of information. There's these, verifying that Stony Creek Farm is it a yogurt company? Is it a petting zoo? Is it an actual farm? Like, right? And so classification of coverages and things like that. A company that went through in 2021, Relativity 6, can within milliseconds can identify that off of 2 bits of data. And so I think ultimately it's taking it really just allowing brokers and agents to focus on the things that add value to their customer, and in the process becoming a much stickier, relationship with them. And also, to your point, if you don't, right, if you don't embrace these tools and these technologies that are going to allow it, it's kind of like going to that one grocery store, right, where 20 years ago it was great. But today, the tile is broken and the shelves aren't stocked, and it's because they're not embracing the technologies that are allowing them to keep up in the industry. And so it's definitely something where we're seeing just extracting the pain out of the process and really focusing on technologies that then embrace that relationship, which just adds value to everybody.
Yeah, John, that's super interesting. I was thinking about as you were talking there. One of my first questions was just going to be, what are you seeing that's adding the most value to the client relationship? You kind of touched on that. I'm happy to hear your thoughts if you have any additional ones on that. But then I guess I'd ask a similar question around like, where do you see the biggest opportunity, right? You see all of these tech companies coming in and pitching where they feel like they can add value. Is there a particular spot where it's just glaring that like nobody's focused on this and they should be?
So that's interesting, because somebody asked me similar question a little while ago, like what's not being tackled, and honestly, I think most everything is being tackled or approached in some capacity. What I'm seeing were the kind of like the areas of biggest opportunity ultimately is in democratizing data, so to speak, right? Because you look at the typical carrier or agency or wholesaler, you look at the supply chain, right? And it's not that just data is in one location here and then needs to be transcribed internally over here, but it's in Excel files, in PDFs, and Airtable databases, in agency management systems, in CRMs, and that's one entity. And then you talk about how does that information get to the consumer, right? And how does that information come from the carrier? And it just blows your mind about this kind of like this data duplication, and it's probably not just duplications, triplication, and so on and so forth. And so I'm seeing a lot of companies that are approaching how to manage this data, but not just say, hey, we need to be the one point of data entry, right? Because that's kind of an easy way of approaching it, is saying, oh, well, it needs to be housed here. But we're seeing ways to extend data across, whether it's internally or externally, that is really, really interesting, because it's very difficult, right? Because you have data that may be represented in multiple ways, right? Like a date time format, right? Great example. If you were going to put together a cover letter that goes out to your customer, you probably wouldn't want this kind of the serialized code of data, but how does that transform as it moves through different inputs and outputs? And so I think there's a huge opportunity here. I've seen some really cool technologies that are approaching it from a lot of different angles and a lot of different interfaces. But I think there's going to be, it might not be a revolution, but I think it'll be one of those things that you look back and you're like, wow, this is changed. And I think that's the biggest opportunity, is how, as an industry, can we, and industry includes startups who are tackling this problem, how can we kind of, again, democratize the data, not only internally, but externally? Because data, quite honestly, unto itself is almost worthless unless you actually do something with it. And so I think the first step is getting access to that data and making sure that it's consistent across the board. And then I think you're going to start seeing a new crop of startups that then says, all right, now what can we do now that we have this to really, really, again, increase that that efficiency, whether it's carrier to broker or broker to customer, or insert a wholesaler in there too. I think it's going to be an interesting 3 to 5 years for us.
For sure. Yeah. That's true. Do you have any examples yet of data that is being democratized, that is ultimately then coming back to build a better relationship with the client, the end user? Are we there yet, or are we still a ways out?
Is it happening? Yes, I would say it's probably happening on relatively small scales at this point. Yeah, so there's a couple. So there's a company called Highwing out of Denver, Colorado. Think of it as building the railroad, right? Like, they're not building the trains that are, right. So they're not building the data itself, but what they're building is the infrastructure for trains to move across the country. And so they're building essentially an interface that will allow data to move to party and creating that kind of that infrastructure. We had one that went through a recent cohort here, insurance gig, where if you're familiar with Zapier, right? Like, hey, I have data in my CRM and that needs to get into this Excel file, and that also then needs to, send an email to. So they're kind of building a similar interface for systems to talk to one another, because siloed systems just basically ultimately end up in data duplication. So how do we do that? So there are some really interesting kind of companies that are on the forefront of that, but I think we're really in the early stages. And like I said, I think probably in the next few years we'll start seeing more of an industry push, because I mean we're building data at a rate that's it seems almost impossible to consume.
Yeah.
Right, and it just increases. It's like a big rock rolling down a hill. It's just picking up speed, and we really need to figure out how to do that. And so there's a lot of startups that I've talked to that are approaching it, some in very different and interesting and unique ways, but nothing where I would say, hey, this is a real good success story as of right now.
Yeah, I was just looking up those two as you were saying that. That's interesting. I've heard of both, but didn't really know what they did.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes, honestly, it's hard to tell from people's websites.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You're like, wait, this sounds like every other Insurtech startup that I've ever talked to.
Yeah.
When you talk to them, you're like, oh, okay, now I see. All right, you might want to communicate that a little bit.
Oh, it's so true. And there's so many of them out there now, which, it's because there are a lot of problems to solve in our industry. Some, as we talked, are built as shiny objects and maybe not solving a true problem, but there are, a lot of things that we can gain from an efficiency, a productivity, a value perspective in our industry. And there's a lot of room for those different tools to have a place in our firms and with that relationship with the client. So that's interesting. on one of our prior shows, we had Jamie Pierce from Synatic on, and they're doing a lot in the data realm as well and connecting systems and things, and it's just interesting the amount of data that is out there, but in how many different places, where it's at, who's gathering it, and then what can we do with it if we can connect these things. And so what other kind of trends are you seeing outside of just data in general? Are you seeing anything else, as you've had a couple cohorts and things over the last couple of years, that you've seen some focus from an Insurtech perspective in the industry?
Yeah, so I won't necessarily go just on those that are part of our cohorts, but I think one of the things that I'm seeing, actually I saw a couple of years ago, more than I saw this year, was parametric insurance. I think that's always one, very, very interesting. Even saw one that was parametric insurance for systems, right? Like, so I host my stuff on AWS, and AWS goes down, or my data center EC2 goes down, or something like that, and they're like, they can monitor that, and then if you're down for a certain amount of time, you have insurance that pays you, because you can't, hey, my website isn't up, right? So I can't make money because I'm an online retailer or something like that. So that's a really interesting trend. One that I'm seeing steadily pick up pace is robotic process automation, where it allows people that do repetitive tasks, essentially create, for lack of a better term, I'll liken it to my deep knowledge of Microsoft Excel, recording macros, right? And it's just a thing that happens over and over and over. And so if you can ultimately get a robotic process to automate that process, then all of a sudden you're freeing yourself up. I think if people approach it like, oh, you can get rid of like 30% of your staff, right? Like, I think that's probably the wrong way of approaching it or selling it, but it's what can those people be doing that's, more value add, as opposed to kind of this cost plus model. So that's a really interesting one that I'm seeing a lot of. And then, this is going to be a bit cliche, AI and ML, so machine learning, and is always a really interesting one. What's interesting is just the places that people are looking to leverage this information. So just AI in combing over customer data sets and leveraging that data, along with perhaps other data that can be scraped off the web, in better understanding your customers, right? And that goes back to that kind of that proactive approach when it comes to brokers, to be able to almost see into the future before your customer does, and say, hey, is this something that's on your radar? And they go, oh, wow, that's impressive that you brought that up, because that's actually something that we're considering. And so I think AI is a very kind of like this big buzzword that people use. But what's interesting is when you boil it down and you see, all right, how are you actually leveraging artificial intelligence to ultimately do something that would take, either if you wanted to do it, you wouldn't be able to do it scalably, so you end up not doing it at all. And I think it just goes back kind of to the thesis of, how do we diminish the amount of time that anybody within the supply chain has to do things that don't add value? And so we're seeing, I mean, and there's probably, like, for every one that I mentioned, there's probably 10 that 10 different areas where I'm like, ooh, that's really cool. That's really interesting. Like, it's funny little anecdote. When I came in, I was like, man, fintech, Insurtech, and it almost was like, Insurtech used to be this kind of this subsection of fintech, right? Because financial institutions started doing things that advantaged people, and then kind of insurance and banking tended to go hand in hand, right? So then everybody was like, well, Insurtech needs to do these things too. And so then they started, and then Now we have BrokerTech, right? So it's a niche on a niche on a niche. And I thought to myself, I don't know how we're going to be able to find startups that are different from one another, year over year over year. And I'm just blown away with just the number and the way that people are tackling problems and how it's different and the different areas. I obviously proved myself wrong, but there is ample opportunity for this to be viable for well into the future.
Yeah. Well, that's where my head goes, is like there's so many of these platforms, these tools coming out, that are very good and solve problems. And I guess I'd be curious to get your perspective around, if you're sitting in an insurance agency and you're trying to figure out how to wade through these, bringing on any of these technologies, any of these tools, what would be your process to kind of vet and understand, is this something that's going to bring value to us, to our clients? And should we go through the process of bringing it on versus just bringing on the shiny object because it looks cool? And then, we all know that we spend money where we shouldn't and all that stuff. So how would you walk through that process?
Yeah, so I think you mentioned at the beginning, every agency is different, so everybody's going to have their own process for it. And I will tell you, I think it's something that agencies struggle with historically. It's actually one of the kind of the values of BTV is that we've put together a process for startup evaluation, which has historically been something where somebody will have a connection on LinkedIn to somebody else, and then it daisy chains from there, right? It's like, oh, hey, you might like this, you might like that, and
Yep.
possibly it gets to a point where somebody either goes, yeah, this is something that we're going to look into. So ultimately, the net effect is and it's a saying that my old accountant used to tell me. He's like, is the juice worth the squeeze, right? So regardless of what door somebody comes in, ultimately the net effect is the process and the pain, because there's pain, whether it's it's cost, it's people's time, it's a new process, is that worth the benefit? And I think having a very unique process that for your organization allows you to determine what is the potential benefit versus what is the potential cost, and really identifying cost on a number of different angles or facets is really important, because it's not just cash outlay, it's opportunity cost, it's time, it's you name it. M3, one of our owners in BTV, actually has a really good, they actually have an innovation team. So what happens is, as things come through the door, it funnels through it's a two-person team, but really what their job is to kind of bridge this gap between what are the technologies and what can they do, with the team internally to say, all right, who would this impact? And is this a problem for them? Yeah. So they actually act as that conduit between the two to help, ultimately flesh out whether or not there's a problem, or it's just something that doesn't apply to them. So it's probably less of a process and more of a just understanding how technology gets identified, like whose responsibility is that, and oftentimes that's not a thing that's identified right within an organization. Yeah. It's am I pushing this uphill, or is it coming downhill? And it can come from a lot of different. So having that defined, I think, is important. But then having a mentality within individuals outside of that kind of that innovation team to say, hey, as part of what we want to do as an organization to grow, we need to innovate. And so part of your job, whether you're an underwriter or wherever account executive. Part of your job is to ultimately help us identify whether or not technology is going to help us, and that's more of a top-down thing, right? It has to be a culture that lives within an organization, and I think if you have that conduit with the culture, I think ultimately figuring out whether or not technology is going to be helpful is going to be a lot easier to do than to your point, just a shiny object that looks nice, and then you end up spending a lot of money, a lot of time, and it doesn't actually do anything.
And then it usually sits on the shelf and we continue to pay for it because we don't want to say it doesn't help anything. And
Right.
I'm going to get to that someday and I'll figure it out. And then,
Sunk costs are sometimes a difficult thing to deal with.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, that's for sure. But it's true. And I do think the key thing out of there, I guess, that I would take away or encourage everybody is to just think about your process for how you evaluate technology. We didn't used to have that process, and
Right.
Now there's so many different things. And not only is it, you don't want to make the wrong decision, but you also don't want to miss out on the right tool, the right technology that you could implement to make a significant impact on your business. So just put some thoughts down, on how you would go about that, that would work for your organization. And I think it makes a ton of sense. So, what else? Anything else that we didn't kind of hit on that you're seeing out in that Insurtech arena? I mean, I think you're probably closer to it than anybody, that you feel like, if I'm a agent or broker out there listening to this, that I should just I should be thinking about, I should know about, or just better understand.
Yeah. So let me think. I would say there are. So there's obviously the Vertafore and Applied Epics, and those tend to get
Giants.
the giants, right? The monoliths of insurance agency management systems. I will say there are some upstart technology companies who are looking at kind of the AMS space maybe a little bit differently. Broker Buddha has kind of looked at it from one perspective. Wonderite out of Boston is doing a really interesting. So they're approaching it a bit methodically in saying, listen, we can't displace them because we're a small company, right? Yet. But what we can do is provide these little modules of service and applicability that might be able to be used in tandem. And over time, their goal is to ultimately have the ability to have a fully functioning AMS system, but do it very incrementally, adding value along the way. So, I would say, hey, like historically, at least since I've been here, there hasn't been much movement in the AMS space, but kind of keep your eye out. There will be more coming down the pipe, which is nice because we all like choice, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We don't like too much choice because then people kind of lock up. But we like, yeah, exactly. We like enough that makes us feel good. So so there's that, and then trying to think if there's other things that are direct. Here's one that I would say is that we're seeing a lot of, and it's not necessarily a technology as much as it is technology-driven products. So really, really interesting on the employee benefit side of things. Platforms to help for aging parents, platforms to help with childcare, platforms to help with like animal care and things that fall into that employee benefits bucket, which I think is really, really cool. And then also some things that more on the property casualty side, workplace safety is a big one. One of our companies, Make You Safe, right here out of Des Moines. they're doing amazing things, and we have another one that does like virtual, using the Oculus headset, doing trainings on forklifts, because forklifts cause the most injuries in warehouses, and so I think there's really some cool stuff as technology continues to advance, to really make it so that workplaces are a heck of a lot safer than they were historically.
Yeah, Make You Safe is an awesome wearable technology. We're familiar with them, and a couple in there that you said. What about on the sales side? Are you seeing anything from the insurance sales perspective that's been interesting out there, or the trend, I should say, maybe?
Yeah, we're seeing, I guess, on the sales side, the thing that pops into mind is more leveraging existing customer data to better serve existing customers, right? Like we all want kind of net new customers, right? You close a new client, that's always seen as, that's fantastic, and it is. But there's a lot of technologies out there that are looking at ways of leveraging the information that you already have cooped up in, however many systems, to better identify where the potential opportunity is for cross-sell and upsell opportunities. And so whether that be like AI or machine learning or anything like that, I think we're seeing on the sales side just allowing the account execs that are responsible for that, allowing them to leverage their data better. And there's a bunch of cool technologies out there. One is called is it Leo? Yeah, I think it's Leo, and it's kind of like conversational information. So you're heading to a client and you're like, hey, how do I tell me how, I don't know, whatever they're looking for, and it can mine the data and present it back to you in ways that allows you to be a lot more prepared for your client meetings and things like that, and pulling information from different data stores, and having it just readily available on your phone, as opposed to having to make sure that you pull reports and things well in advance. So I think there's really some interesting technologies that come out, on all aspects of the insurance industry.
Yeah, that is crazy. Well, it's always interesting. Yeah, like you said, how you see different people solve different problems, and everybody comes at it from a different perspective. And it's a fun time to be in the industry. Just a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of different ways to do things, and so this was fun. I think this will be cool to kind of see where all this technology goes and how we can implement it.
Yeah, we can play it back in 3 years and see if it if it hits the mark, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right, there you go. Or how much new stuff is out there, right? So
yep.
Well, awesome, John. I appreciate your time. That was fun to kind of go through and dive into. So
yeah. Again, thanks for having me. Sorry it took so long. I know I had to change a date, but I do appreciate you working with me and having me on.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Great conversation, John. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you.
See you later.
All right, cheers.
Thank you for tuning in to Getting Past the Premium. We are excited to continue breaking down barriers and finding solutions together. If you would like to reach out regarding anything you heard in today's episode, find links and contact info in the description. Until next time, have a great day, and let's continue getting past the premium.